destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, January 29th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Wendy Parmet, professor of law, public policy, and urban affairs at Northeastern University, author of Constitutional Contagion, COVID, the Courts, and Public Health. Also on the program today, 3 U.S. military personnel killed in a drone attack in Jordan, providing a new threat of expansion of the Israeli assault on Gaza. And in the wake of the ICJ ruling on Israel's genocide case, Israel accuses 12 UN refugee workers of aiding Hamas, which ends up triggering a suspension of all funding of the primary agency aiding Palestinians. Meanwhile, in this country, with increasing political pressure, Biden administration supposedly contemplating slowing the Israeli weapons pipeline. Senate immigration deal in total disarray, despite Biden's total acquiescence to a Republican immigration stance. Meanwhile, Republicans in the House release impeachment charges against DHS Secretary Mayorkas. Donald Trump ordered to pay E. Jean Carroll $83 million. Teamsters, yep, it's a lot of money. Teamsters met with Donald Trump as Trump calls Sean Fain a clown. And a trucker convoy is heading to Texas to support Texas secession, and doing so for the Lord. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. Emma is off today. She is just coming back slowly making her way back. I don't know. I think she could be taking a bus back from San Francisco, where she was in the San Francisco Sketch Fest with the Bituation Room. She's taking the long way back.
Taking the Union Pacific up from San Francisco or Sacramento.
I've actually taken a train from San Francisco to New York. It was a very long train. Yep.
When did you do that?
1992, when back, when I thought like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to record my conversations. It's like deep into Lenny Bruce at the time. He used to carry around a suitcase at one point, or in a briefcase, that would record people. At that time it was reel to reel. I had reversed the headphones on my Walkman and turned them into recording devices. And then I realized halfway through the trip, I'm not good at, in social situations and meeting people like this. And so I had one conversation with a guy in the smoking car back when I was a cigarette smoker. And he was in there with his kid, and he was telling me he was going to Colorado. And I was like, did you find work there? And he's like, well, no, my kid's got asthma. And I was just like,
oh gosh,
we're in the smoking car.
Wow.
Yep.
It's a very 1992 conversation.
It was a very 1992 conversation. Speaking of throwback Mondays, in the fun half, I will maybe retell some stories of my high school reunion that I attended in Worcester this weekend. It was pretty crazy. Let's just leave it with that. Things got pretty out of hand. All right, let's get right into this. This story of the suspension, and we'll talk more about this later in the program, but the idea of suspending funding for the primary aid agency in the West Bank, it's horrific. And it was clearly done as a, let me put it this way. There is no doubt that Israel has had a long-term agenda of getting rid of UNRWA, or the UN Relief and Works Agency. This agency has something like 35,000 employees. And the accusation is that 12 of them, maybe it's 13, depending on who you talk to. Or I should say in Gaza. Sorry, it's 13,000 workers. The agency, the idea of 12 people participating in the attack on October 7th, the idea that you would hold the whole agency responsible for that is just shocking. We certainly had more than 12 law enforcement officials involved in January 6th, but we're not shutting down those police departments. I don't know how many times a month we hear of a couple of cops who are dirty, and we don't shut down police departments. We don't find people in governments who are corrupt and shut down the government. I mean, it's just absurd. It's just completely absurd. There's been a longstanding agenda by the Israelis to figure out a way of shutting down the UN Relief Works Agency. We should say that something like 35-40% of Palestinians in Gaza are now being housed at UNRWA facilities because they have no homes. The vast majority of Gazans are getting their water and any food supplies from this agency. It is UNRWA shares the list of all its staff with host countries every year, including Israel. This agency, we should say, was started in 1949 in the wake of the development of 700,000 Palestinian refugees because of Israel's colonization of that area and essentially ejection of Palestinians at that time. And the idea that this agency can't function, they've lost 150 of their workers in Israeli attacks. It's just, it's incredible. It
Hamza
really is.
Syed, who's the co-host of a New York Times Trojan Horse Affair podcast, points out that up to the night before the ICJ ruling, the most serious claim about UNRWA was that some staffers had praised the October 7th attacks online.
Yeah, this was clearly something that they were holding in the event that they needed something to distract. And so I'm sure this was a twofer for the Israelis. And the idea that U.S., UK, Australia, I think New Zealand, a couple other funders have suspended their funding, which, just those countries alone make up the bulk of it, is just reprehensible. Particularly moments after the International Court of Justice says that Israel has a responsibility, in addition to preventing their soldiers from committing genocide, to provide aid for Gazans and allow aid to flow to Gaza. And moments later, the chief mechanism to distribute that aid, to organize that aid, to provide that aid is defunded. That's quite a coincidence, and on incredibly thin grounds. Meanwhile, as Joe Biden gets more and more pressure to do something other than completely support Israel's assault on Gaza and defunding the chief aid agency providing aid to Palestinians in Gaza, 1,000 black pastors came out calling on Joe Biden to call for a ceasefire. Increasingly, the Biden administration is starting to realize that they can't even get any local leaders of Muslim Arab communities in Michigan to meet. They can't even get them to meet with the Biden administration, which is, and again, 150,000, I think, Muslim and Arab Americans voted in Michigan's 2020 election. They broke pretty heavily for Biden. This is a state that in the past it's been, tens of thousands, not even, of people who made the difference in the election in 2016. 2020, a little bit larger margin. Nevertheless, the Biden administration is starting to feel the pressure. And I don't know whose idea it was to send out Nancy Pelosi to talk about this stuff. My guess is it was Nancy Pelosi's idea. But who knows? Here she is on Sunday, with Dana Bash. And this is, let's listen to this clip.
One of the challenges that Democrats might have in organizing is some anger in some corners of the progressive movement over Joe Biden's support for Israel in its war against Hamas terrorists. How concerned are you, especially given the fact that we have seen protesters over and over and over at his events? How concerned are you that young people, Arab Americans, progressives, I'm not suggesting that they're going to go vote for Donald Trump, but how concerned are you that they might just stay home?
Well, let me just say this, because I've been the recipient of their, shall we say, exuberances in this regard recently.
Did you catch what she almost said there? She almost said, I've been the victim. I've been the recipient. Go back. It gives you a sense of her mindset. This is someone, incidentally, who has been very, very well compensated for her job as a congresswoman over the years, in the form of what many would describe as insider trading. In fact, she essentially doomed the bill that would have prevented congresspeople from trading stocks. But if you follow,
you're playing the game called capitalism.
Exactly. If you follow Unusual Whales on Twitter, you would find that if you wanted to engage in some form of day trading, if you just shadowed her trades, you would do quite well.
Index.
Yeah. But just go back just a sec so you can hear her say victim, recipient.
Over and over at his events. How concerned are you that young people, Arab Americans, progressives, I'm not suggesting that they're going to go vote for Donald Trump, But how concerned are you that they might just stay home?
Well, let me just say this, because I've been the recipient of their, shall we say, exuberances in this regard as recently as in Seattle on Thursday, unfortunately, wanted to disrupt our very exciting democratic meeting there. They're in front of my house all the time. So I have a feeling for what feelings they have. But we have to think about what we're doing. And what we have to do is try to stop the suffering in Gaza. This is women and children, people who don't have a place to go. So let's address that. But for them to call for a ceasefire is Mr. Putin's message. Mr. Putin's message. Make no mistake, this is directly connected to what he would like to see. Same thing with Ukraine. It's about Putin's message. I think some of these protesters are spontaneous and organic and sincere. Some, I think, are connected to Russia. And I say that having looked at this for a long time now, as you know.
You think some of these protests are Russian plants?
I don't think they're plants. I think some financing should be investigated. And I want to ask the FBI to investigate that. But apart from that, let's just say it's all spontaneous and sincere. Let's say it's all spontaneous and sincere. Young people care about the right to choose.
Okay. All right.
Investigate them with the FBI, but they'll come out because of abortion.
There is no doubt that there is a significant, I think, cohort of people in D.C. who think that Hamas was aided in getting their intel and their ability to do this attack by people who wanted to. One of the benefits may have been to undermine or to fracture U.S. politics on some level. I'm not saying I believe this. I'm saying, like, I do think that there is a cohort in Washington that does this. But it is completely nonsensical to assume that Putin wants an end to the Israeli attacks on Gaza. One of the biggest, I think, geopolitical benefits that has accrued to anyone's agenda in this attack, both October 7th and Israel's response, has been Putin. It has completely derailed Ukraine funding. It has taken Ukraine off the front pages. It has completely distracted the United States. I mean, the idea that Putin wants an end to this, and so is funding the ceasefire, is just bizarre. It's just bizarre. And she tries to conflate it with people who have been not protesting about the Ukraine war in this country. It's bizarre. It's incredibly desperate. And she can say that there are young people who want X, Y, and Z, but there are clearly a lot of young people and a lot of Arab and Muslim Americans, and now 1,000 black pastors representing presumably some of their church-going flock, as it were, and others, of course, around the country who do not want the U.S. to midwife this genocide. It's crazy. And apparently she put out a statement to, hours later to clarify what she said. This is spokesperson from Pelosi in a comment to Rolling Stone. As Speaker Pelosi said on CNN, we have to focus on stopping the suffering in Gaza. And she will continue demanding all the hostages be freed now. You know what else might help, at least not increase the suffering, would be to cut off the support for all the aid agencies there.
Yeah. It's always weird when the staff comes out with, well, this is what the to use the North Korean phrase "dotard" actually meant, is something that we can actually defend.
Speaker Pelosi has always supported and defended the right of all Americans to make their views known through peaceful protest, although some of them should be investigated by the FBI. I put in that last part. Informed by 3 decades on the House Intelligence Committee, Speaker Pelosi is acutely aware of how foreign adversaries meddle in American politics to sow division and impact our elections, and she wants to see further investigation ahead of the 2024 election. Just crazy. Just crazy. It's just crazy to even articulate that. There's to no one's benefit. You'd have to be a lunatic to believe what she's saying.
And to understand this country's history and how these things play out and the type of power that the FBI has to surveil. I mean, it's not ancient history. They surveilled Iraq war protesters.
They've surveilled...
George
during
Floyd
that era, they surveilled protesters at, vegan protesters.
Yeah.
Who were protesting at like a ham processing plant. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Wendy Parmet, professor of law, public policy, and urban affairs at Northwestern University, author of Constitutional Contagion, COVID, the Courts, and Public Health. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Emma Vigeland out for the day. Joining us now, Wendy Parmet. She's a professor of law, public policy, and urban affairs at Northeastern University. I said Northwestern earlier. She's the author of Constitutional Contagion, COVID, the Courts, and Public Health. Welcome to the program, Wendy.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Let's just go through, before we get into the sort of the questions of the law, like broadly speaking, the concept of social determinants of health. When we talk about public health policy, what are the things that public health policy makers generally look at when they're assessing what impacts public health?
Sure. So, I think in the United States in particular, but elsewhere too, we tend to think of health these days primarily as an individual matter, right? Why am I healthy? Why am I sick? What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What's in my genes? And there's value to that. And we certainly want our physician to think that way. And we want our physician to treat us when we're not well. But as a public health, when we turn to public health, we're not thinking about why did one person, Wendy, get sick or not sick? What can we do to treat Wendy or not treat Wendy? We're looking at what makes a population. It could be a community. It could be a part of a community. It could be a city. It could be a state. What are the factors that are influencing the health of this larger group, of this population? And when we look at that, we take this sort of broader perspective, this population perspective, what we're seeing and what we're understanding is that a whole range of social factors really influence how that population does. Is it healthy? Is it not healthy? Is it healthier or less healthy than folks in a different population? And these are the social determinants, the social factors, structural racism, pollution, housing, employment, and I like to add law that affect the health of the community or a community, as opposed to what makes a single individual healthy or not.
How and you're adding law into this mix. You're coming obviously from a legal perspective, but how, like, in terms of the development of this understanding of public policy, public health policy, these different elements, I imagine, that you just outlined have entered into the equation with the more data that we have had, and as this as a social science has developed over the years. And you're suggesting that law in particular has been left out of the conversation and needs to be considered in this, and it is having a direct impact on our public health. That takes me to the title of your chapter 2, Salus Populi Suprema Lex, which means let the welfare of the people be the supreme law. When we look back in U.S. law, broadly speaking, was that ever, in fact, the law of the land? I mean, did that diktat that has been around for, I guess, I don't know, 400 years, did our legal system reflect that concept?
To a large degree. Now, I need to make a bunch of caveats, because if we go back to an earlier period, the understanding of what legal decisions, what policies would affect health was obviously very rudimentary, right? If we're going back into the 19th century and even before then. And obviously, we can point to a lot of things in this earlier period where the legal system really hurt health and exacerbated health inequities, right? I mean, the law's tolerance of slavery for a very long time, and then Jim Crow is example number one, but I can give other examples. But what I am trying to say, and what I'm trying to recall in the book, is that the idea that the law should protect health, and that judges should consider health and give weight to the community's health in their decision making, was widely followed, both especially at the state level, but also at the federal level in constitutional law. And it was taken for granted, right? I mean, this was a dictum that many judges cited, but even when they didn't cite it, you could see this in the deference they gave to health. You can see this across a wide number of legal doctrines and theories until the middle of the 20th century.
All right, let's go back to some of that early, to some of those early, I guess, examples of that. But I mean, I think this, like, this concept. I mean, because there's like the law as manifested through judges and in our legal system may not have had the level of sophistication to appreciate that slavery was a health issue as well, on some level, right? I mean, because they did not consider slaves to be anything other than a commodity at that time. And so the idea of the health of this commodity is, the same way that you would talk about, I guess, depreciation for a piece of equipment, et cetera, et cetera. But when it came to specifically questions of health, this concept that the welfare of the people is paramount. Can you talk about, like, I guess, in conflict with what? I mean, what is, like, I mean, because on some level it seems like obvious, like, of course, that the welfare and that's probably a broader meaning than just health of the people should be paramount, but specifically relative to what sort of like a strain that has existed within the context of the law.
Well, it's a great question, and I think it's important to understand that I think we often think of the 19th century as this period of laissez-faire, rugged individualism, no regulation. People did their own thing. People took care of themselves. And in fact, that's not true, right? That in fact, the earliest, especially the antebellum period, was a period of significant regulations. Now, we didn't have the kind of complex bureaucracies, and we didn't have the complex federal bureaucracies that we have today. But all kinds of manner of things were regulated, from, the quality and the weight of bread to vaccine mandates going back to the 1820s. Sanitary measures. And all of these different laws were not assumed, especially if I'm going into the antebellum law, to be in conflict with what we today think of as individual rights, including property rights, because people simply didn't have rights to do things that were considered detrimental to the common good or the public's health. And so you had just a lot of regulations. They would come and go. They would be more or less effective, more or less scientifically grounded. But
were these local or federal, or were they local that was edified by legal tests on a federal level? Like, where did these emanate from? These regulations
in the antebellum period or pre-Reconstruction, they were mostly state and local, right? You did have some federal, but not a lot. It was mostly state and local. Localities and sometimes states enacted quarantines. They regulated businesses. They took care of sanitary measures. You just had a sort of a wide swath of So one of the terms that was often used is you had a well-regulated, well-ordered republic, right? A well-ordered state. And these measures, for the most part, were just not seen as conflicting with individual rights, because the idea that there were rights against the public, very common idea today, right? I mean, the idea that the government does something, it violates my right, I'm an American. This idea that our freedom comes prior to the well-being of the public was not a very well-established, it was still nascent. Before the Civil War. It begins to develop during Reconstruction. And so then the first time when you start getting the Supreme Court really beginning to develop the relationship of constitutional rights, particularly the rights protected by the by the Reconstruction Amendments, and individual rights and public health. But this is not there at the beginning. And what has happened now is we've gone to a place from sort of no recognition of individual rights, or barely any, to a place where, as I describe in the book, individual rights continuously trump the public's health, and not just trump it in individual cases, but leave governments increasingly incapacitated to respond to the social determinants of health and even to pandemics. So we're kind of left to be on our own, because our law now makes it increasingly difficult for governments to respond.
And I think what's important for people to understand is you're talking about the law as it's interpreted, because the laws have not changed in this regard. When we talk about the constitutional amendments in the wake of the Civil War and Reconstruction, constitutional amendments, they haven't been updated.
Right.
It is really the interpretation. So describe to me like how 13th, I presume mostly 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment, how they developed. It's almost like they were upended. And I wonder if it was also like, what is that a function of? Because one of the cases that you sort of really sort of pivot off of is the Massachusetts Jacobson case, or Jacobson versus Massachusetts, which I think came out of Cambridge, Mass. Tell us about that case, but then if you could, like, track how the 14th Amendment gets sort of reversed. And I wonder if also, these amendments, I'm putting too much on your plate right now, but Justice KBJ made the point in a case about affirmative action that these amendments were specifically meant not to be colorblind, that they were in fact, color conscious. They were made to, in many respects, take freed slaves and make them full citizens, because they were a specific cohort. But that wasn't. It's more than implicit, but it's not quite explicit. And so that failure of making that explicit gave room for the 14th Amendment to be sort of twisted in some ways that ultimately lead to where we are now. But I'm sorry, go maybe start with Jacobson.
Yeah, so Jacobson is from 1905, and it dealt with a vaccine mandate. The state of Massachusetts gave local boards of health the authority to impose vaccine mandates. And these mandates were much more intrusive in some way than the ones we're accustomed to. These were anybody walking in the city of Cambridge had to be vaccinated or show proof of vaccination or pay a fine, but it was a criminal fine. And there was a lot of resistance at the time. There was an organized anti-vaccination movement. Some things are new and some things are not. And organized resistance to vaccines go way back. And Jacobson and other co-defendants refused to pay the fine. They were charged. They defended their case in criminal court, arguing that the Constitution gave them the right of liberty and that the mandate violated their rights. And the case eventually the state courts disagreed with Jacobson, and the case eventually made its way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, in a 7-2 decision by Justice Harlan, affirmed the state's power to mandate the vaccine. And for a long time, Jacobson has been one of probably the most cited, the most relied upon case about the government's power to protect health, especially against communicable diseases. What's really interesting about Jacobson is that it's at this moment where the court is both looking backwards to the older jurisprudence and forward to the newer jurisprudence. And the backward jurisprudence, which is, I think, most of the opinion, doesn't ask what is the nature of Jacobson's right. Does he have a fundamental right? Like, that kind of language is not accessible to the court in 1905. Jacobson himself was a pastor. He had religious objections to vaccines, but it wasn't a religious liberty case. It was just the 14th Amendment protects me. And the court said, no, the 14th Amendment doesn't protect you because the state has the right to make reasonable public health regulations. The liberty that you have does not only exist against the state, but Harlan says real liberty depends on law. It depends, right? The liberty, so there's this theory of a social contract in Jacobson, right? You get benefits from being in a society where others don't have smallpox, right? Your risk of dying is a lot less because everyone's protected against smallpox. That's your real liberty. But Jacobson also foreshadows the jurisprudence that we are more familiar with and looks to the future and says, well, yeah, but there might be a sphere of individual liberty. And maybe in some case, not this one, but sometimes the state might violate that. And if the state acted arbitrarily, or capriciously, or oppressively in a particular case. So it foreshadows where the court ends up going in the second half of the 20th century with this idea of individual autonomy. But what I want to stress is pre-Jacobson, that idea of bodily autonomy, that I get to do with my body what I want to do, that's just not really in our jurisprudence.
And I mean, it also strikes me that forward-looking jurisprudence that you're talking about is forward-looking only in the sense that it was perhaps opportunistic for those in the future who wanted to develop that right, because it seems to me it's just as easily argued that the reason why they also cite the idea that there are instances where you do have a certain amount of freedom is probably, to my mind, looking back on the fact that we are 30, 40 years out at that point from having enslaved people. And that it could be like, if we were really, harming your individual liberty that had no sort of like a benefit to the greater good, that would be the issue. But I guess it's irrelevant as to what the intent of the court was at that time, and more relevant as to how it's used in the future. But where did this concept, and we're getting into sort of like negative rights versus positive rights, and if you could maybe explain that idea, and where did this start to creep up? They saw that little opening in Jacobson, but what happened in society and the law, which I think are, in politics in the law and in economics in the law, that created this new development in our society?
Right. So to first, what are negative rights? To oversimplify a little, we say negative rights are freedoms from the government, right? Keep your hands off of me, government. I want to do what I want to do, and the government can't stop me, right? And that idea sort of assumes people are isolated from the government, isolated from society. They have their own preferences. They have their own autonomy, right? It's a very common view. Positive rights are rights, sometimes we would say are rights to benefits, but not just benefits, right? Rights to health, rights, but not just health insurance, right? Right to live, things that we can't, it's the freedom that we get from living in a society. It's the freedom that we get. I can do my own thing, not because I'm left alone, but I can do my own thing because I'm not going to die of smallpox, because smallpox isn't prevalent all around me. It's not raging. So where did these rights come from? I mean, liberal theory, right? You can see it in John Stuart Mill. You can see it arising with the rise of contemporary, capitalism and the movement away from a more regulated economy. We can also, and you point to Civil War and Reconstruction. I also try to make the argument in the book, right, that in fact, the reducing prevalence of contagion makes it easier for us to believe in our independence. So in the early 19th century and earlier, communities were just completely, repeatedly devastated to degrees that we cannot understand by cholera, yellow fever, smallpox. These waves of epidemics would come through, and people were really, they didn't really understand where these diseases came from, but they also did understand that most people could not protect themselves, right? In that world of contagion, our interrelationship is, I think, easier to understand than we see it today. So what starts to happen post-Reconstruction, and I think, here I might differ with you a little, is less the looking back to understanding what the Reconstruction framers meant, although maybe Harlan did, but it's more you get this increasing move towards, one, business interests challenging and trying to use the 14th Amendment to limit state regulations as we move to a more capitalistic society. And at the same time, a movement away from public health to seeing health in an individualistic term. Go to my doctor when I'm sick. I don't need the state to regulate stuff. I go to my doctor when I'm sick. And you get to this more and more increasingly individualistic approach. And we begin to get more and more emphasis on the development of rights against the state, by freedom of speech, freedom of religion. These weren't, we can point to them in the Constitution, but they didn't apply against the states in 1905. And so we get this turn, and you said earlier, upended. I think what we really get is a flip. And so today, instead of asking what's the state's interest as the first question, courts say, what's the individual right? Religion, speech, Second Amendment, right? We focus on our rights, not the state's interest.
And this happens, and I mean, as you say, the thing about contagion, it never really occurred to me that this is a much more sort of like devastating force in that era, that people are willing to realize that it's beyond an individual's control as to whether they're any individual, whether they're rich or poor, or whether they, they don't have the opportunity to work at home. So it's like, if you're going to work, you're going to be working, you're not going to be doing it over Zoom. I would imagine too, things like, the Great Fire of Chicago, and like it gives an example of, we really need to be communitarian if we're going to fight these things. But as technology develops, as wealth disparity increases, there are certain cohorts are like, I really don't need it. I can have my own fire department if I really wanted to. We in this gated community, and I can go in on Zoom, and I don't need to have this communitarian response. Because I mean, you say this develops in the in that early 20th century, and this is obviously like the sort of a big robber baron era, but then we go into an era of during World War II, where we have Roosevelt really espousing the idea of positive rights in his Four Freedoms speech. It carries a lot of weight. But then coming out of World War II, do we see any type of like legal cases that mark this transition to where we get into, I don't know, the past 20 years, where this idea of like religious liberty and like even movements of corporations to say like, you're telling us to have our employees wash our hands, but you're imposing on our First Amendment rights to not tell them to say that, to do that.
Yeah. So, the movement towards individual rights started long before the Roberts Court, long before COVID, right? And, we see it in the social movements of the 60s, challenge authority, individual rights, allow for dissent, recalibration, even in the Warren courts against some of the very problematic aspects of the early jurisprudence. And that was in accord with Roosevelt's and the New Deal agenda. Where I think things sort of go further is it's relatively recent that the court starts applying those individual rights as trumps on what I would call core public health powers, right? So, you used to court, even back, the Rehnquist court is clear, no positive rights, First Amendment is protected, free speech. We see this in the second half of the 20th century. But now we get it even to, in the middle of a pandemic, religious liberty overrides law, stay-at-home laws, right? Religious liberty overrides laws to close schools. So now we go from recognizing those rights and rejecting the idea of positive rights, which goes back to the Rehnquist court, to now going to the place where we say, even in a pandemic, where the court says states, can't, at least not the Supreme Court, but some lower courts reading the Supreme Courts, can't have vaccine mandates without allowing anyone who has a religious exemption to opt out. Right. So now we're kind of going, and that's what you said earlier, the flip. We've gone, from perhaps overly deferring to public health laws to now kind of giving them almost no weight if someone has an individual claim that the court recognizes.
How did the court manage to take the idea of the country, the government is not allowed to acknowledge a specific religion or promote a specific religion, or inhibit the practice of it, to this is a get out of jail or get out of law free card that is waved around. And why is, I mean, how is it that religion is privileged over just like, I don't like this law?
Right. Now, I mean, the short answer that the justices who take this view will tell you is because religion's in the first text, free exercise is in the text of the First Amendment, and so it is. On the other hand, that text has been around for a real long time, and even as recently as 1990, just in an opinion by Justice Scalia, the court said that if a law was generally applicable and neutral as to religion, so everyone needs to be vaccinated, no right for someone to opt out because of their religion. But we start in the Roberts Court seeing the justices moving away from that and beginning to really privilege free exercise claims to where it has become today. And I love the way you said it, opt out of law card. You know, and in the book, I give the hypothetical, could you get out of traffic laws? If you say, well, my God tells me I need to go through red lights, you know, my religion says I got to get to worship fast, so my religion overrides. And, you know, there are nuances to the doctrine that I'm not going through now, but at its simplest, that's the place where this court seems to be pushing us. And that is so antithetical to this early idea that in a sense we're all in it together, right? We're not all in together, because if I want to speed through the intersection because I want to worship, then, or I want to not be vaccinated and give you my smallpox, well, you know, we're not in it together because my religious right overrides your right to be healthy or safe or not be killed in a car crash.
I mean, so much of this is a function of like what 5 or 6 people are who are on the court, who has appointed them. Frankly, it is almost, I'd say, like a 99% I've found in my experience when reporting or reading about court cases. If you tell me who appointed the judges, I can tell you what the outcome of that case is going to be on these sort of like top line cases. I mean, it's just at least the ones that, you know, I read, and, you know, maybe those are a self-selected group of cases. But how much of this sort of like religious freedom doctrine is ultimately sort of the tip of the spear to completely, or as much as possible, eliminate the ability of the federal government, or any government for that matter, to do things like regulation? Because, like, you know, on one hand, this assault on, and there's sort of like a unvirtuous circle in terms of the way that this is absorbed by the public and then sort of spit back in terms of like what our culture accepts. And, you know, we just heard a case in, that may end up ending the Chevron deference doctrine, which is about essentially the government's ability, as opposed to the court's diktat, as to, how far the executive branch can go in regulating without there being a specific, an incredibly, almost impossibly specific mandate from Congress. This seems to be part of the same movement. It's just different flavors with the same goal.
Sure. So first, I guess I'm going to push back at you a little about the judges. I think that's who appointed the judge. That's clearly true now. I don't think it was always true. I think things were a little bit more ambiguous once upon a time. As I said, Scalia wrote the decision to clarify that facially neutral laws do not give away to religious claims. So things are become more partisan in the judiciary, and there's no question that if a COVID measure came up, if you told me it was a Trump judge, I pretty much knew the way it was going to go. If you told me it was an Obama judge, I probably knew the way it was going. So clearly true today, less true once upon a time. Second, partisanship. And
that once upon a time, though, I mean, not to harp too much on it, we're talking like maybe 70s. I mean, how far back are we going? Because I still see it to the extent that we have that many Reagan judges on there. They will be the most surprising to me when they have a case. But a lot of those judges now are, well into their 80s, and increasingly, as the rise of the Federalist movement, essentially, by the time we get to the aughts, it's pretty clear, Harriet Miers is not a Supreme Court justice now. Let's put it that way.
Right. I think it's hard for me to give it a date, right?
Right.
I think you're
fair
right.
enough.
I think, we start to see an increasing partisanship. And I think in some sense, the pandemic cases were the last ones to fall, right? Because once upon a time, you would have said, if there was any place that wasn't going to be partisan, it would be a pandemic. And so when you start seeing these very highly partisan alignments in the middle of a pandemic, you can sort of say, oops, we've really gone all the way now. But I don't think, I don't think we had gone all the way 30 years ago. Okay, so I can't give it a date because it's moving. But I think, I forgot the other question you asked.
Well, essentially, are these? Is this what we're seeing in the context of, let's say, the Chevron doctrine,
right.
Chevron deference doctrine, and religious freedom? Really, now just a concerted effort to get to us to a place? And again, I would not be surprised. This had been floating around for about 10 years. This idea of it's a First Amendment infringement upon my rights as a corporation to force me to say, I don't know, worker protection or customer protection regulations. Like, you can't force me to put a sign up in my bathroom that says employees must wash their hands. It's
right. Yeah, I absolutely think this is part of a larger, longer, broader conservative legal movement that has been challenging the regulatory state from numerous different angles. It's also related, I think, to what we see as if I could call it the marriage, right, between the social conservative movements, right, who care about things like vaccines and church closings during pandemic, and the more economic, right, deregulatory movement that doesn't want environmental regulations. And one of the points I made in the book was, I think it's ironic, but the pandemic decisions giving people rights against the state during the pandemic is then used by the court and lower courts to stop environmental regulations and regulations that were designed to slow down global climate change, right? So, and again, I think it's a little ironic because once upon a time you would have thought if the government could do anything, surely they could step in during a pandemic. But it turns out that these social cases that are about ostensibly religious freedom become the cases, some of them, that then become the vehicle for going after a wide array of regulations. And it is certainly related to the attack on the Chevron doctrine, although to be, clear, the Chevron doctrine itself has sort of been so much pushed to a side with the major questions doctrine, which the court used during the pandemic to stop CDC from having an eviction moratorium, to stop OSHA from protecting workers essential workers during the pandemic, that to some extent the attack on Chevron feels a little redundant right now.
It's almost rear guard.
These are all connected. These are absolutely all connected.
Are there specific cases for those of us who are less adept at these things? How does a ruling saying that the U.S. government cannot say that there is a vaccine mandate, or more specifically, the U.S. government cannot say that we're going to fine, that you have a choice, either pay a fine. I can't remember exactly what it was. Pay a fine or make sure that 95% or 100% of your employees were vaccinated. It was an either or situation. So it wasn't like technically a mandate. It was more of like a vaccine ultimatum option type of thing. How does that translate into, although, like, fighting against that, it seems to me, is just really doing capitalists and people who want, commerce to continue unfettered its own work. But how does that concept then translate into that other space that fights against, environmental regulations or any other type of regulations?
So it has to do with how the court decided to read the statutory authority. So in the case you just cited, and by the way, the mandate was either a mask, you require your workers to be tested and masked, or you require them to be vaccinated. So an employer could just require masking and testing, right? Executive agencies only have the authority granted to them by statute. And most of these health statutes have these broad powers, and they'll say, and I'm just paraphrasing, such other measures as necessary to protect health, right? They don't necessarily lay out with enormous specificity every measure that can be taken. And of course they can't do that because, who could foresee that the pandemic would be this pandemic and not some different kind of pandemic, right? I mean, health crises vary. In the COVID cases that challenged Biden's orders, the Supreme Court began to adopt this view that you could see in a few earlier cases, but they really formalized it, which they now call the major questions doctrine, which is if a regulation will have a major impact, if it's major, whatever that means, a huge effect on the economy, political, social, whatever, it's not completely clear. The agency, in that case, OSHA, cannot issue the regulation unless they can point to a specific grant of statutory authority that says you can do exactly this, even though there might be language that says, and such other measures as the agency feels reasonably necessary. And so the court does this under the major questions doctrine. And what they claim, and this is where I think it's pretty disingenuous, they claim that they're doing this to keep the executive branch from overriding Congress, but they're really also handcuffing Congress, right? Because now Congress can only set up an agency to protect workers' health if they specify each particular measure. And it really makes it very difficult. And during the pandemic, the Supreme Court issued two such decisions, one about the eviction moratorium and one about the testing or vaccine mandate. But lower courts use this in a wide range of to enjoin other pandemic measures, including CDC's mask mandate that you have to wear a mask on an airplane, including that the federal workers had to be vaccinated. So it really kind of put a lot of Biden administration's attempt to deal with the Delta variant and then the Omicron rise. It really just, again, handcuffed their ability to respond to the pandemic starting in late 21 into 22.
I suspect that I see these things as more political, not being a constitutional law professor. But with that said, and that granted, do you see any pushback within the legal institution or any type of concerted effort to, and I don't know how sophisticated, frankly, the Federalist Society and the right-wing legal movement, how sophisticated their plans were insofar as, like, I mean, if you have to come up with something like the major question doctrine, you haven't done a lot of like rigorous intellectual planning for this. You basically just said like, oh no, we have a wild card and we can do whatever we want, but we just called it the major questions doctrine. We've more or less made this thing up out of whole cloth. There was like 10 years of maybe a little bit of stitching, and then we just sort of expanded it into this sort of like, it covers everything. And so it's not like they did a rigorous intellectual, like if this, then this, then this, then this. I mean, when you got to go to like, it's a big question, so we're going to decide it. But is there any, within the legal profession, is there any type of like legal thought that is pushing back on this?
Well, of course, absolutely. There's some, little shameless advertising. We're putting together, my colleagues and I, a meeting in the spring to try to respond. Like others certainly have. There's a lot of scholarship going on. I think so, but I think we need to be honest and say there's a lot more money behind, right? So politics has a lot to do with this. So does economics, right? I mean, I don't think we can actually separate the judicial decisions from all of these interrelated factors. The partisan divide in the country has something to do with it. I do think we see a few signs that the Supreme Court has at least taken its foot off the pedal a little bit since Dobbs, since all the revelations about the justices. We're seeing less use of the emergency docket to come in and make major decisions. They're being a little bit more modest or a little bit more temperate, at least in some of their actions, although I'm not sure they're going to actually do it in terms of the final doctrine. But, from the time Amy Coney Barrett joined the High Court, which is really where I start my book.
Which we should say also almost coincides 1-to-1 with Biden, with the Biden administration starting, because people forget it was 3 weeks. She's confirmed 3 weeks, I think before the election, if I remember correctly. So it's more or less like, the court really starts revving up at that point.
Right. So from that moment until Dobbs, which is really the period where I focus on when I'm not doing the history part of the book, the court was on the fast track to destabilize our law. And part of what I want to suggest is that sort of aggressive destabilization, that aggressive disregard for precedent, pushing stuff aside, sort of the bull in the china shop approach that I think most of the public saw in Dobbs, really started in November of 2020, right, 2 weeks after the election, right when her first major decision the court issues with her on the bench. And for 2 years, they were in a real hurry to reverse a lot of things. And the roots of some of those reversals come earlier. And what I try to show is that the roots of our vulnerabilities to COVID and to our the erosion of our democracy, which I talk about in the last chapter, were there earlier, but they were high speeding through it and disregarding and overturning case after case after case. And many of them were really important. They're just not as well known. So Jacobson went from being really followed by all the lower courts to kind of pushed into the dustbin. They never overruled it. They just ignored it. The Scalia decision I talked about, they didn't overrule it. They explicitly said didn't overrule it, but they, again, disregarded its teachings. And we can go case after case after case that they did that. They did it with the major questions doctrine. So they were kind of a bit on a rampage for 2 years and left us, I think, with a very frayed social contract. Our health is vulnerable and our polity is vulnerable.
Well, Wendy Parmet, professor of law, public policy, and urban affairs at Northeastern University. The book is Constitutional Contagion, COVID, the Courts, and Public Health. Thanks so much for your time today. Little distressing, but I find that every time I talk about the court system these days, it's increasingly distressing, but really helpful to understand. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking with you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program, wherein, after a brief moment of weeping and during the break, we'll come back. And I don't know. We got a lot of bleak stuff today. But it's Monday. We got the whole week. I'm also convinced that like those justices, they were like, we're going to race through this for 2 years. And then all of a sudden they realize like, we can take our time. We're all in our 40s. And, as long as Clarence Thomas is now flying private jets everywhere, he'll be fine for another couple of years. So we get time for this. Folks, just want to remind you, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free part of the show, free of commercials, but you also get the fun half. And you also help this show survive and thrive. It is our members that we rely on numero uno to support this program. You can be one of those at jointhemajorityreport.com, jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee tea. No, fair trade coffee and hot cocoa. Got corrected. I guess they're not doing tea. But they also have the Majority Report blend. You can show off the Majority Report blend. It's also a delicious blend, incidentally. And you can get other blends. Check them out. If you have never checked out Just Coffee, today is the day for you to do it. JustCoffee.coop. They're a co-op. All fair trade. They really go beyond fair trade. They really work with their farmers in Chiapas, I think it is, and in Eastern Africa, to help them out. Sometimes, you're a farmer and you get bad weather, you get a bad crop. A lot of times coffee companies will desert you and go find somebody else. These guys really work with the coffee producers. Check them out. You'll love the different coffees. JustCoffee.coop. Emma is, I don't know what she's doing now. Probably sitting at the beach. I don't know. It's really cold in San Francisco, right? At the beach.
Yeah,
right
I don't
now.
quite think it's beach weather.
Well, she is basking in the glory of the Habituation Room appearance last night in San Francisco. Bradley, what's happening with ESVN in the meantime?
we will be back on Thursday when Emma returns, and we will break down the conference championship games, a fun Sunday of football ahead of the week off before the Super Bowl. So we will talk about those two games as well as some of the head coaching personnel shakeups around the league, and then we'll have the week before the Super Bowl off until we give our picks before our final picks of the NFL season next the Thursday after this one. YouTube.com/ESPN show to catch up on anything you've missed.
Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Yeah, Sunday on Left Reckoning for patreon.com/Left Reckoning members. Talked to Heidi Matthews and Tanya Cerisier about their article in Counterpunch. Bombing Gaza isn't fighting sexual violence, and the use of sexual violence as a specter to defend a war campaign or a ethnic cleansing campaign. So check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
Folks, see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
And the alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
We bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflakes says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report, reading an I am John Dalton's baby. I am real. My dad and I are stranded in the Arkansas desert and want you to give us money on Cash App. You didn't give a number. What's your Cash App?
You're playing the game called capitalism.
Steamboats Willie. Did Bradley say fun day of football? We were watching the same games. Were we watching the same games? It's not fun watching two teams who should have won take very obvious dives. I think the NFL needs to do a thorough investigation here.
Wow, is this? I did not pay attention to a down of football, but I did see the PSYOP conspiracies on Fox News that what the Chiefs have advanced to the Super Bowl. Bradley, is that correct? Yeah. And that's because Taylor Swift is a Pentagon asset, and that they're throwing it so that Travis Kelce can probably be Super Bowl MVP, probably on a last-second touchdown, and then at the opportune moment, instead of saying we're going to Disney World, he says vote for the Democrats, and the election gets thrown to the Democrats. That's just my prediction.
Can't wait.
I got odds on that. I placed a bet. I had Emma place a bet on that for me.
Can you do that on Trade Sports? That would be amazing if that football player had the ability to do that. It's fascinating the way that people's minds function in terms of like politics.
That's what I'd say. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Or existentially terrifying.
Or yes, or coming to that realization of like, yes, this been an interesting experiment, this country. What time does a meteor get here?
Yeah. Looked possible for a bit there, but what time does he check out?
Not Nick Fuentes. Is it me or is Texas going full Israel with the standoff at Eagle Pass? These people invented the invasion narrative to further militarize the border and make an instant death penalty for anyone crossing the border. If I may quote drummer Randy Ebright from the Mexican rap band Molotov, if not for Santa Ana, just to let you know that where your feet are planted would be Mexico. Correcto. Left is best. What's going on right now in terms of immigration is just insane. The Democrats have all but given, and we don't know the details of what they have hammered out in the Senate. It apparently is giving the president more authority to reject people at the border. It is ostensibly to provide more funding for asylum judges who hear asylum cases, and to sort of like facilitate and expedite that process, which is a good thing. We should also, I don't know if it's included in this bill, I doubt it, but maybe the ability for immigrants to work during that period. But it also, here is Joe Biden touting this bipartisan immigration legislation. But let's be clear, the Republicans who are supporting it, the Republicans in the House, for the most part, do not support it. They have been told by Donald Trump not to support it because they want it on the, they want it to remain a live issue and don't want to give Joe Biden a win, even though it is maybe a win for Joe Biden, but certainly not for immigrants. In the Senate, McConnell told the Senate Republicans, Donald Trump wants this as a campaign issue, so we're going to scuttle it. And then when he was called out, Tom Tillis, I think, said it was like immoral. McConnell backtracked. And now James Lankford, who has been sitting on a committee that has been negotiating these policies, is basically been excommunicated by his own party. Here is Joe Biden bragging about a bipartisan deal that does not look like it's going to happen, And it also grants him authority that I think is not authority that you want the president to have. As you know, if you consider the fact that Donald Trump may be this guy in a year from now. But here is Joe Biden at an event in Columbia, South Carolina.
Real progress, one of the most important issues we're facing, security at the border. The first bill I introduced was for a massive change in security at our border. 2 months ago, my team began to work with a bipartisan group of senators to put together the toughest, smartest, fairest border security bill in history. The best one the nation's ever seen. It would finally provide the funding I requested early on and again in October to secure our borders. It includes an additional 1,300 border patrols. We need more agents on the border. 375 immigration judges to judge whether or not someone can come or not come and be fair about it. 1,600 asylum officers and over 100 cutting-edge inspection machines to help detect and stop fentanyl coming on our southwest border. It'll also give me, as president, the emergency authority to shut down the border until it could get back under control. If that bill were the law today, I'd shut down the border right now and fix it quickly. A bipartisan bill would be good for America and help fix our broken immigration system and allow speedy access for those who deserve to be here.
I don't know if I want Donald Trump to have the ability to unilaterally shut down the border, frankly. But it also appears that this legislation is, I don't even know if it's dead on arrival. I mean, it's not even arrived. And it's already dead. I guess that would be dead on arrival, right? I mean, but it's dead in like it's dead on the embarkment as opposed to the arrival. Let's put it that way. So maybe this is just a way of the Biden administration trying to neutralize this issue. But you're really setting a low bar if you're not asking for anything. When you talk about border security, some of these measures, like I say, are helpful. But if you're not asking for anything else, DREAM Act, extended DREAM Act, you're setting the table for a really horrible deal in the future. But what's also fascinating about this immigration, I don't know, potential legislation is that it is a Republican self-eating machine. Here is James Lankford. He is Oklahoma senator. He has been negotiating this deal. We don't even know, like I say, exactly what's in it yet. And but we know that regardless of what's in it, it's probably not going to pass the Republican House. And Republicans in the Senate want to kill it as well, even. And Lankford is getting attacked. Do we have the letter? Yeah. This is from the Oklahoma. Here it is. The Oklahoma State Legislature, or the Oklahoma, I should say, Republican State Committee members put out a resolution condemning and censoring their Senator Lankford's open border deal. Whereas Senator James Lankford was recently working with Democrat Senator Charles Schumer on an open border deal to allow 5,000 illegal immigrants a day to enter and work in the United States. And just to be clear, if it allows 5,000 immigrants to enter and work in the United States, they're not illegal immigrants anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
I mean, he's condemning a potential law.
It means brown.
And then they quote the Oklahoma Republican platform. We support limited legal immigration and embrace legal immigrants who choose to assimilate to our American culture, language, and values. they left off skin tone, but I think it's implied. Whereas Senator Lankford playing fast and loose with Democrats on our border policy not only disenfranchises legal immigrants seeking citizenship, they don't care about that.
Yeah, they
but it also
did a big crocodile tear on that one.
Exactly. It puts the safety and security of Americans in great danger. The caravan's coming. They may take your summer home up in a lake in Minnesota.
Lake Minnetonka.
Whereas authorizing several thousand people to invade our borders before any action can be taken.
I don't think you're melodramatic at all.
Contrary to the oath of Senator Lankford took to the Constitution, and therefore outside the area that he is authorized to negotiate in. This feels like it was written by maybe the incoming class of the college Republicans in college. Maybe.
Yeah.
Be it resolved that until Lankford ceases from these actions, the Oklahoma Republican Party will cease all support for him. He's not up for re-election, is he, Bradley, in 2024? That would be great.
Let me double check here.
Here is Lankford, just beside himself. He's going on Fox's Shannon Bream to basically complain. Here he is.
That are not being enforced. So why give him this in an election year, the cover of this deal that, critics say is still going to let a lot of people in, but he gets to take a victory lap that he's gotten something done.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not going to let a bunch of people in. It's focused on actually turning people around on it. It is interesting. Republicans 4 months ago would not give funding for Ukraine, for Israel, and for our southern border because we demanded changes in policy. So we actually locked arms together and said, we're not going to give you money for this. We want a change in law. And now it's interesting, a few months later, when we're finally getting to the end, they're like, oh, just kidding. I actually don't want a change in law because it's a presidential election year. We all have an oath to the Constitution, and we have a commitment to say we're going to do whatever we can to be able to secure the border. Just as a quick, for instance, the last 4 months, we've had 50 people cross our border on the terror watch list. 50. We've had tens of thousands of people that were declared by this administration a national security risk that came across our border and were released. It is our constitutional obligation to be able to secure our country as fast as we can secure our country. This puts in mandatory pieces that haven't been there in the past to make this administration actually enforce the law. I would tell you that I don't know of anyone that believes that if President Trump was elected, well, he was president right now, this border would not have this problem. So the thought that somehow President Biden can suddenly be the pro-national security president in the final months of this is not.
He thinks it's funny that the Republican Party basically reversed themselves. How is he not embarrassed by himself? How is he not embarrassed by this?
It's the I never thought the lepers would eat my face.
Exactly.
Yeah. You never want to be the Republican who's like, I thought we cared about policy.
Dude, where have you been?
I mean, aside from our terror watch list being far too large, obviously, if you have stopped people on the terror watch list at the border, isn't that functioning exactly as how you envisioned it? What is the terror watch list if not for to stop people at the border and say, hey, you're on the terror watch list. You either can or cannot come in here. I mean, how is it supposed to work? Shouldn't we be concerned that we have this many people on the terror watch list and none of them seem to be coming into the country? We have no knowledge of them. It's just absurd. But this is where we're at. And I frankly, don't know, because we don't really know what's in this bill, whether we should be super excited or disappointed that the Republican Party has decided that they're just joking about actually wanting some type of legislation.
It's an interesting strategy. to say we're going to give, we want a lot of executive powers, because it makes the argument that, hey, we need to win again because otherwise the fascists are going to have a lot of power. Even that much more acute of an argument, I guess.
Yeah. Agreed. It'll also be interesting to see if the media holds any of these people to account. I mean, you got to go to Fox News to see them saying, like, how can you do this? You're giving Joe Biden a win. The real question is when Langford shows up on, Meet the Press or CBS Face the Nation or whatever it is, whether they'll ask him, like, how can anybody take the Republicans seriously when they get the legislation they want and then they don't want to vote for it? We'll see. All right, I'm going to turn on the phones, folks. The number is 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. Bullprog, what you're not getting is that you should be letting your imagination run wild with the number of terror watch list people we're not catching.
What about the people that should be on the terror watch list that aren't on the terror watch list, too?
Sam's Big Discord says, if we get rid of our terrorist watch list, then no one who is on the watch list would get in. Space Lennon, going to call from 208 about organizing efforts in the AFT and NEA to call for a ceasefire, BDS, and more. I lift Senator Yank Ford. Majority Report Wardrobe Coordinator, if we're going to suspend UNRWA funding for alleged actions of 12 out of 30,000 employees, I have some thoughts on the police. Indeed. Kowalski from Nebraska. I personally do not understand why we can't just give these immigrants coming over the border work visas, let them send the remittances home, which would stabilize their economic conditions back home. This is one of the reasons why immigration under Trump was down so much. It was his policy with Title 42 that ended up destroying this flawed but stable dynamic. Biden contributed to this dynamic. Coronel may not destroy the economic engine of Venezuela, which had bled through its effects of all its neighbors. Maybe in the Cuban embargo, so it can begin working relations with all of its neighbors and won't be seeing so many Haitian migrants. This is all self-inflicted foreign policy decisions. Of course, but you're forgetting the massive utility that exists for some in this country to attack immigrants. Calling from an 802 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? (802). You got him, Bradley?
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Ashley from Vermont.
Ashley from Vermont. What's on your mind?
Hi. Well, first I just wanted to tell you guys that I watch you every day, and I think your show's awesome, and I agree with pretty much all your takes. So I really appreciate you guys. I'm calling because I just read today about the Charles Littlejohn case. I'm not sure if you heard about this, but he is the guy that leaked tax documents of Trump and I guess a lot of other wealthy people as well. And I guess he was sentenced to the maximum of 5 years. And I wasn't sure if you heard about this, but I'm just calling to talk about that name, Littlejohn. I mean, isn't that kind of on the nose for leaking wealthy tax documents?
Well, I mean, Robin Hood would have been a little bit more on the nose, right, but Littlejohn, but it does give hope that maybe there's another one out there.
Yeah. Well, that'd be exciting.
Yeah, I guess Republicans are saying that he wasn't sentenced harsh enough, and they want to give him like the death penalty. But I guess they still gave him the maximum though, and
yeah, 5 years, $5,000.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't heard of that case, but I'll look for that.
Yeah, this broke right at like noon. Charles Littlejohn, former IRS contractor who leaked Donald Trump's tax returns and those of thousands of wealthy Americans, has been sentenced to 5 years in prison and will have to pay a $5,000 fine. Yeah, the nature of the offense was an intolerable attack on our constitutional democracy, Judge Anna Reyes said before issuing the sentence.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate the phone call.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Pretty amazing that you'd have the right wing sort of complain about people going to jail for literally smashing through the doors of the Capitol, threatening lawmakers to prevent them from certifying a vote, and then call for the death penalty for somebody who released other people's taxes.
I can't remember which Scandinavian country is, but their tax records are all public, and so like rich people, you can really just like literally Google their returns, and it's embarrassing for them. I saw a documentary; they don't like it, but you know, I think that's be nice.
Calling from a 774 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Katrina in New Orleans.
Katrina in New Orleans. What's on your mind, Katrina?
Hey, so you guys are talking about FBI watch lists, and you guys may remember that Jewish Voice for Peace had a sit-in in one of the Capitol office buildings in October. I was there, and Marjorie Taylor Greene had people wandering around taking pictures of people's phones from behind, and my Signal group text was part of that. My full name was on it. And I got doxxed back in October, which is not fun. Do not recommend Marjorie Taylor Greene doxing you. And I was all over her socials. The Heritage Foundation wrote a piece about me, which was also horrifying. And shortly after, I got a text from a friend who asked why I was in Congress. And she printed out those crazy big poster boards that congressional members print out sometimes. She printed that out with our text message on it and a hearing with Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, and told him that I am a terrorist and need to be investigated by the FBI ASAP.
And then what happened?
It's a good story now. He didn't seem interested.
I mean, I guess
which I'm kind of shocked by.
The upshot of having Marjorie Taylor Greene ask for something of the FBI is just that they're just like, oh my God, she's a lunatic. But it seems like it's not inconceivable that they could have been, you know, that you're not far from that happening.
Exactly. At first, I was a little terrified, but I live in New Orleans, but I was staying in D.C. with one of my friends. So it helped that I wasn't at home, but also I feel like if the FBI wanted to find me, it wouldn't be that hard.
No,
the doxing part was terrifying, though, for sure.
Has it calmed down a little bit?
Yeah, it has. I ended up deleting my Twitter because it was just too much. And
you're not missing anything. I can tell you that right now.
I feel like I'm probably not. So it was maybe a sign from God. But I'm an attorney, and in California, you need to have your personal information online. So that was the worst part, is like all my personal info was available. So thank you to the State Bar of California for that.
Oh, God.
What effect has this, I mean, on you, obviously, but other Jewish Voice for Peace members? Like, I mean, obviously, have people cooled down a little bit, or like, I guess, lay low?
I mean, I'm not, I was there kind of as an ally for JVP.
Right.
And if you guys have seen photos or videos, there were some people holding banners at the second floor on the balcony. And I was up there with a few of my friends, and the three people holding one banner with me got like very violently arrested, like with metal cuffs, not zip ties. And I got punched in the head by Capitol Police and thrown into a wall and had a concussion. So my friend was like, dude, you can't get arrested if you're bleeding into your brain. You like gotta go. You can't be in jail overnight. Because we heard that they were going to keep people even though they didn't. So it was, that part was rough for sure. I lay low for a little bit. The worst part of the FBI thing was I was organizing with some groups in DC, and because I'm an attorney, I'm like a white attorney. They're like, yeah, you go deal with the police. And I was like doing some lead stuff with them. And after the FBI situation, they're like, dude, the director of the FBI knows who you are. You can't be part of this anymore, which is honestly the worst part.
Right. Well, appreciate the work that you did, and sorry that it's been such a crap show for you.
Hey,
but
it's a small sacrifice.
Well, appreciate it. I really do appreciate it, and good work.
Sorry, my one sentence as an immigration lawyer is after 6 months after you apply for asylum, you are eligible for a work permit, but you do have to wait that entire time.
And theoretically, this legislation would cut down the amount of time that you're in the States anyways, and that you would get processed before then, right? I mean, that's the theory.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Biden has been horrific on the border, and I think people don't really pay attention to it because they're like, oh, it's not Trump. But it has been horrifying watching the things he's saying. Like you just mentioned, he can just close the border whenever he wants, and it's like, dude, it's not just you; it's going to be, Trump too.
Right.
But it's a nightmare.
It really is.
I mean, if you're a Trump spokesperson, you're bookmarking that clip and saying, yeah, when we want to close the border down, we're just going to play that.
Totally.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so many things Biden has said about immigration that I'm sure Trump's people are like, hey, look, the Democrats want it too. So it's tough.
Appreciate the call. I mean, that is thanks. That is, that's part of the problem. Even when you're not going to have legislation get passed, you're putting rhetoric out there that is seeding the political argument to the Republicans, and it's going to come back, and it's going to come back and bite you, not him, but this issue in the ass. That's basically it. Calling from a 208 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Sean from Washington.
Sean from Washington. What's on your mind, Sean?
Yes, I am. Last week, I just wanted to talk about a couple of different sort of exciting things that are going on in the ranks of the NEA and the AFT, organizing around, what's going on in Palestine and trying to organize a coherent response to that.
The NEA and the AFT are the two major education or teacher unions in the country.
That's true. And the NEA is the largest union in the country with over 3 million members.
Are you a member of one or both?
I am a member of the NEA. I'm my local vice president. I'm also on some regional councils, and I'm a national and a state representative. I'm actually going to be going to Olympia here in just about an hour to go testify in the Senate Early Education and K-12 Education Committee for our free lunch bill that unfortunately was killed last year.
But good luck with that.
Go ahead.
Good luck with that.
Thanks. It'll be easy. The issues we have going on right now. First off, if anybody's listening, just a quick way to get involved. If anybody is an AFT or an NEA member, you can go on Instagram, Facebook, any kind of thing like that, and just search for groups called Educators for Palestine NEA, Educators for Palestine AFT, and just shoot a message to the people in those groups, and we'll get you plugged into the correct group chat, Discord, Signal chat, whatever works best for your level of involvement. And we're looking for people to do things from everything from passing resolutions in their local representative assemblies that they can then bring. Because the issue is that state conventions, state representative assemblies are starting up soon, next month and through March and April. And then everybody's going to be bringing what they are able to do in their state assemblies. They're going to bring that to the National Assembly in Philadelphia in July. So we're trying to get as many people on the record as possible to at least just pass resolutions calling for ceasefire. A resolution is just a belief statement to help animate, what business items are going to be able to be made. And business items are really when we allocate money and resources to, like, for example, AFT has a very, very large sums of money invested in some Israeli businesses, including security. So AFT members are, separate from me, are pushing to end those investments, whereas we in the NEA are pushing more towards trying to create a resolution to revoke or to not give endorsements to people who have not explicitly called for ceasefire. It's a little bit high hopes on the national level regarding President Biden, but the more we can have sort of belief statements in place that are having us give out endorsements, give out member volunteer resources and things like that to people who are not actively helping us call for a ceasefire, the better. So there's all levels of engagement that people can get in on there.
Yeah, and people should understand that, if the leadership of the NEA or AFT are feeling this pressure, they're going to communicate that to the White House. And,
certainly, yeah.
I mean, Randy Weingart is in touch with the White House on a regular basis, I would imagine, and the same with
and Becky Pringle, the president. I almost said principal, the president for the NEA. She just got done doing a campaign event with Jill Biden, and here very soon she's going to be attending the Educators International Conference, which is happening in Argentina. It looks like there's going to be quite a few demonstrations around that out down there. Once they get out of it, once Americans tend to get out of the global north a little bit, there's going to be a lot more pressure. I'd like to I don't want to stay on the phone too long, but I just want to plug, there is going to be a solidarity rally for Palestine. And I know that leadership knows about this by now, so I'll just say it on the phone. But February 10th, if you can get to DC, any of the groups I just mentioned on social media, the Educators for Palestine groups, they have a lot of the details there too. But February 10th, Washington, D.C., there's going to be an NEA and AFT rally. They're calling on our unions to revoke Biden's endorsement until he supports a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the occupation. It's going to be meeting up at 10:30 a.m. at the AFT headquarters, and they are going to march down to the NEA headquarters, and then there'll be a rally after that. That's one thing that if people are in the area, they can go do, but ultimately, we're just trying to get as much pressure from as many places as we can. Is really what it is. I've written a response letter that should be published somewhere soon to our NEA Today and our AFT publications, putting out basically statements written by the ADL about equating Zionism with Judaism and going on about how our membership efforts to push for a ceasefire are, well, depending on which article you read, it's either a regrettable position that some people have, or it's just blatant examples of anti-Semitism. So it's really disappointing to see our largest unions in the country and our largest education unions just playing into sort of the cynical Republican plan to brand colleges and things like that as like hotbeds of anti-Semitism. And our national leadership at this point is just playing right into that in their messaging.
Yeah, it's horrible. I'm curious if the example of Mark Diamondstein at the Postal Workers Union, who's been extremely, I think, bold in his stance as like, I'm an anti-Zionist Jew and also a union leader. I'm curious, like, when examples like him exist on the scene, like, does it still just crash against the leadership? Like, it's, they just some propaganda. Like, I just, how do you ignore something like that?
Well, we have sort of a pretty interesting organizational model in our unions, because so much of educational policy and it is really done at a very granular level, like a district by district level, and then it's states. So it's still a very locally controlled thing. So once you get to the national level of our union, it's different than something like the postal union, where one person can have such like a huge sort of impact on that. Whereas we do have our national, but if we're being completely honest, at our national level, for decades now, we've really just functioned as a proxy almost of the Democratic Party apparatus, not necessarily any Democratic initiative or anything like that. We very much, our national leadership functions as a rubber stamp sort of for specific Democrat policy. Right. So I don't know how much I can really draw over with the Diamonds team, but I'm familiar with his activism.
Well, we'll put links to the groups that you mentioned and that protest in, I guess, about 10 days or so.
Yeah, it's going to be coming up soon. And I mean, like I said, every state's sort of at a different timeline with these things. So anybody who wants to get in, there's really no better time than right now to just get in, even if all you're doing is signing onto a petition, holding a sign, with the organizations, things like this, everybody can do something.
Appreciate the call.
Thanks so much for the time. Bye-bye. Love
you. Meanwhile, there was a Friday deadline issued by the Department of Homeland Security for the Texas National Guard to allow U.S. border control agents to go into this park. Is it Eagle Park?
Eagle Pass.
Eagle Pass
is the town.
And to go into this park, essentially, and get rid of the razor wire that has been installed in the Rio Grande. It has caused, the park is called Shelby Park. It has caused the death of numerous migrants, mostly women and children. And the deadline passed. It's unclear what the federal government intends to do. Here is Kristi Noem going on about how she's unsure if this is going to lead to the next civil war.
Could take action today. Governor, I do want to ask you about that in a minute, but just to put a button on the letter that you wrote and what is going on with regard to this, to the razor wire. You said that you could be willing to send South Dakota National Guard troops down to the border again. We heard from your colleague in Oklahoma, Kevin Stitt, that the situation could lead to a force-on-force conflict. Congressman Clay Higgins said the feds are staging a civil war. There is real concern that things between Texas and the federal government could turn violent. Are you worried about that?
Well, that's why I went to the border on Friday. I went there to see with my own eyes what was going on, and recognizing that I am, as governor of South Dakota, I'm commander-in-chief of my National Guard. That's a heavy responsibility that sits on our shoulders. We have the same responsibility for those families and those soldiers that the president should feel for our military and how he engages them. So we don't know where this will escalate. We don't know what the president will do. We don't know how he'll try to manipulate our soldiers, and if he will even defend our country from this invasion that is happening. So that's why I went there. I'm all in to protect our state sovereignty. I deal every day, Dana, in South Dakota with the effects of this open border. We have those Mexican cartels that have a presence on my 9 tribal reservations, where those communities are suffering from the drug trafficking and the human trafficking that's going through my tribal reservations, where I don't have any jurisdiction. I can't go there and help bring peace to their community. I can't help protect them from these Mexican cartels.
So are you?
I mean, this is the what the right is doing. And every time Joe Biden gets out there and says, I need authority to close down the border, he is essentially providing more fuel and oxygen for the "we are being invaded" talking point. It is the messaging on this, the policy positions on this is just bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. Meanwhile, we have a new trucker convoy that is assembled in this country that is apparently going to heading to the border as we speak. It is known as the Take Our Border Back convoy. They've called themselves God's Army.
Okay. Not God's convoy.
That would have been better. This is a biblical monumental moment that's been put together by God, one convoy organizer said on a recent planning call. We are besieged on all sides.
Was that one convoy organizer God or no?
Speaking for God. We're besieged on all sides by dark forces of evil. Am I being too knee-jerk to assume this person has a Southern accent?
No.
I mean, would people feel better if I did it in a Massachusetts accent instead of like a Southern one? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. It's time for the remnant to rise. Ruth Brunstein, this is from this Vice piece. Assistant professor of sociology at the University of Connecticut, author of Prophets, Patriots, and Faith and Democracy Across the Political Divide, says when people believe that they're working on behalf of God, they might be willing to resort to relatively extreme measures. Yeah.
Oh, interesting observation.
Yep. The organizers' current plan is for the convoy to depart Virginia Beach on Monday, today.
Okay.
Snake
Virginia
down
accent.
through the southeast, stopping over in Jacksonville, Florida, before making its way several stops along the border. The convoy will then split up for separate rallies on February 3rd, one near Eagle Pass, Texas, a second in Yuma, Arizona, and a third in San Isidro, California. A group of 6 Patriot World influencers, I don't know what that means, including Kim Yater, who runs a self-empowerment, self-help group, and an anti-voter fraud group. They're all the same people. It's amazing. Started organizing the convoy a month ago. God's army is rising up, she said on a planning call. We have all been chosen for this
Where's
time.
Tim Pool on this?
Yeah, Tim Pool is going to be riding out in front. They're going to strap him to the grill of one of these cars, these trucks.
We've been sleeping on the influencers, I guess. I've never heard of Kim Yeater.
Nope. The convoy's crowdfunder on Give, Send, Go has raked in more than $30,000 this week, totaling nearly $50,000 by last Friday morning. Once willing to die defending this country, now willing to die protecting my family from this armor of God. Wait, no, I'm sorry. Now willing to die protecting my family from what this country has become, said one donor who identified himself as a Navy vet. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes, wrote another. Apparently Alex
Give,
Jones
Send, Go sounds like it's like one of those, like, it's like a Venmo clone made by the people who make those websites you use to download videos from Twitter.
Exactly. Pete Chambers, a former military commander who says he was a Green Beret. There's a war literally happening for America now. He was on
it wasn't
Alex Jones saying that.
Oh, that was Alex Jones, right?
Not him. That was Jones said that, right?
Jones said that, right.
Chambers said, we're at 1774 right now. He later drew a comparison with the biblical story of Gideon's army in the book of Judges. The army's faith in God allowed them to prevail over their enemy despite being vastly outnumbered. They're like, who is it that they're going to fight? Amazing. This country's insane. I don't know what to tell you, folks. It's just like, it's crazy. Call from a 361.
Somebody embedded with the camera, though. I want to see how that progresses.
Call him from a 361 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Matt calling from South Texas.
Matt from South Texas. Hey, man, do you need us to fly in some supplies for you? Are you under invasion? Are you blockaded?
The invasion over the last 3 years has me stocking up on, I guess, mines, anti-tank weapons. I'm not sure exactly what we need.
Do you need some freeze-dried food? Can we drop ship that to you or airdrop it to you?
Oh, yeah. Please do. Keep in mind, it's an active combat zone, so make sure you drop it in the right location.
The big wheels are coming in to convoys coming.
Oh, I'm sure they're here to help.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it wasn't actually what I was calling in about, but it is definitely relevant. I think a lot of people here don't support what our governor is doing, but don't really have a recourse for going against it. So,
yep.
But that does kind of tie in what I called in about was what the Republican Party is doing, including Governor Abbott, and how far right they've gone has actually helped push a lot of my previously Republican labeled and Republican voting family to the left, and just trying to get them over that line. So maybe that one day we can actually see a purple and or blue Texas.
I have no
wishful thinking.
Yeah, I have no sense of that, to be honest with you, because every year we hear that Texas is like on the verge of going blue, and it always feels like consultants just want to convince somebody to spend money in these massive media markets, which makes them really rich.
Right.
And things don't happen as quickly.
Right. And they talk about all the people from California coming here, but really the people fleeing California, I guess, are people that are already right-wing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true for the most part. I mean, I would imagine it seems completely obvious that the net is going to be more conservative people. If you're leaving California for Texas, it is because you're sick of how lib it is out there.
Right. And complaining about housing prices. Oh, sorry. Cats are running around. Housing prices, which have definitely just gotten just as, maybe not just as bad, but have surged here just like everywhere else. But on trying to convince family members, I mean, I myself have a hard time voting for Joe Biden right now with the last 3 months, but trying to convince them who are previously right-leaning, their big hiccups with him are interest rates, government spending, the whole, they want small government. How would you recommend pitching, I guess, voting blue to?
Well, if somebody's talking about interest rates, I would say how low do they need to go for you to, I mean, the Fed controls interest rates, but their argument would be, well, would Joe Biden spend so much money that the Fed had to raise interest rates because of inflation? But I mean, if this is, and look, people have their own bailiwicks. If this is their bailiwick, I would say to them, how low do interest rates have to go before you're okay with what the interest rates are? I mean, they're certainly, they're high relative to what we've had them at. I mean, when I was a kid, it was 18% or something. But they're certainly high, and they're keeping people in their homes because you can't go and get, the same 2-bedroom today that may cost you, I don't know, $1,100 in in a mortgage will cost you $2,200 in a mortgage if you went to replace it at these interest rates. But I would ask them how low do interest rates have to go, and how under control inflation needs to be, and what do you anticipate GDP growth? I mean, if people are into that type of thing, if that's their complaint, the numbers are going to be pretty good, I think. I happen,
and I'm not sure if that is really what they're concerned about, or if it's
it isn't. Of course not. Of course it isn't. But it may make them cop to what the real issue is. Or it may make them feel a little bit less inhibited if they know that you've called their bluff.
Right.
I mean, that's all I can say. Good luck.
Hopefully, I was going to say, hopefully maybe this is the year, but
no.
I'll hopefully try and get out and get other young people out to vote blue across the board, at least for now, trying to get the best we can.
All right. Appreciate the call.
Thanks so much for taking the call.
Thanks. Big house. My partner just got accepted into medical school, and as someone who is a chemist, can barely afford to live off my wages. Hopefully this means we can not be financially starved one day. I can't saved.
It's wild to see that we have shortages in nursing and things like that, and the things that students have to go through in order to get those degrees in this country, with regards to taking out loans from maybe private institutions and stuff like that. It's not ideal, I don't think.
Nutty Dan, are you guys getting more Dem skeptical voters on the phones than previous elections?
No.
I don't know that we are. I mean, in my in my life in general, I think that there are more people, not so much Dem skeptical, but there's a lot of people for whom supporting Biden or voting for Biden, I should say, is extremely difficult in light of his unfettered support for what Israel's doing. And I don't think that's a completely irrational response. I don't look at voting the way that these people look at voting. I don't think you get. I don't.
It's rational. It's not empowered.
Exactly. I vote for a specific outcome. Obviously, no one individual can make can create an outcome. But when I vote, it is to create an outcome, not to. And a lot of these folks don't have a theory on what outcome it is that they want. If you don't want Joe Biden to be president, you should vote for Donald Trump. If you think Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils, you should vote for Donald Trump. I am all in favor of the lesser of two evil voting strategy. And if you happen to think that Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils, you think that things are going to improve in these areas under Donald Trump. I mean, it's a totally rational decision to vote for it. If you think you're punishing Joe Biden, you're not. If you think you're disciplining the Democratic Party by voting for a third party, you're not. We have time and time again seeing how that strategy just doesn't work. Let's go back to the phones. Calling from a 631 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. This is Greta from upstate New York.
Greta from upstate New York. What's on your mind?
So I have to say, ever since I've been listening to you, which has been over probably 12 years, I agree with you on the voting. But as a wife to a Kashmiri American, it is really hard knowing how harmful occupation is to vote for Biden. And I know that sounds crazy. Okay. But,
it doesn't sound crazy.
Really
No, it doesn't sound crazy to me. I mean, I understand that.
But that's actually why I wasn't calling for that. I actually had the unfortunate experiencing of debating the Israeli-Palestinian issue with a really good friend of mine this weekend, which I stay away from because for me it's not a rhetorical debate. It's not this I'm too attached to it, right?
Right.
But we got into it because I said that Biden might not win because of the Israel situation. And he really, because he's so afraid of Trump winning and hates Trump so much, he was really towing the Democratic line on Israel. And he's so not, I was so shocked. I went into that conversation really thinking that we were allies. So that's why I felt a little safe going into it. But an hour later, after just a devastating conversation, I was like, wow, I think we have some left-leaning people who just because they're really scared of Trump winning, they're defending Biden.
Well,
and I think I think he listened. I think he heard a lot of what I was saying. But anyway, I just wanted to share that because it was really insane.
You would think that someone who is that worried about Trump would be worried about what Biden's doing. You're not going to convince people. Right now, I just saw an article today. In Michigan, there were. I have it. I actually just sent it to somebody because we were talking about. There was about 147,000 of the 200,000 Muslim American voters in Michigan cast a ballot in the 2020 election cycle. Okay, that's a very high percentage of that cohort that's voting. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't know how that broke, Biden, Trump, but I am 100% sure that the majority of those people voted for Biden in 2020. And Biden won by 3 percentage points over Trump in 2020. So there's a little bit more room than Trump winning over Clinton by 0.2%. But nevertheless, I mean, I can't remember what the voting, what kind of number of votes, Bradley, have been done in Michigan in 2020, but 120,000. I don't know how many votes you're losing in that instance, but here's the part that is relevant. The Biden administration can't even get a meeting with any groups, Muslim American groups in Michigan. As far as I can tell, maybe anywhere. But like the mayor, I think it's of Dearborn, won't meet with him. I mean, this is, and look, the mayor's a politician. Who knows what's in his heart? But if the guy's not meeting with the Biden administration, it's because of what his constituents, of the political pressure he's feeling, and where his 100%. Constituents are. And so, if somebody out there wants
to get a load of this, sorry, I came home from this debate with a friend to an email from my Zionist neighbor who I've asked 3 times to stop sending me his stuff. And he wrote a letter to the editor basically chastising Arab Americans. It's titled "Cutting Off Your Nose to Spite Your Face." And then he quotes Khaled Beydoun, who in 2016 wrote a book saying, Trump is a Islamophobe. My neighbor in the next paragraph is saying Biden is not an Islamophobe, and went on to kind of like lecture the Arab community, and I lost it. And he wouldn't accept it. Like, basically, usually I ignore it, but I went back at him, and he basically threw the Holocaust at me, and that I'm insensitive to his feelings, and that okay.
Yeah, arguing with Zionists about this is, I think,
not
the
productive. Probably.
Do. What's that?
Probably not productive.
I think arguing with people who, want Biden to win. So Biden beat Trump by 150,000 votes in Michigan in 120. And so if every one of those Muslim Americans had voted for him and decided not to vote for him, it still wouldn't change the outcome of Michigan. But to assume that it's only Muslim Americans who are going to be not voting for Biden because of that, and to assume that they have no friends or family who are sympathetic to their perspective, or to assume, frankly, that like any other cohort of voters, are not engaged in this, I think is foolish by the Biden administration. I mean, aside from, I've said this many times, aside from like the sheer morality of it, from an electoral perspective, it's just completely blinkered what they're doing, seems to me.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your call. I'm taking my call, and I can't tell you how much your show means to me and how comforting it is for me. And rest in peace, Michael. I miss him so much.
I appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thanks. You too. Hang in there. American Dream. I've been considering starting my own business hustle, but I would have to quit my job to have time. So till I actually build anything up, I'm just going to ask, I'm just not going to be able to rent a place or to live or get health insurance. Is this the wrong show to ask? I'm not sure I follow the exact question. What is the question? But I would imagine, yes, it is the wrong show to ask. Oh, Aaron is not cool. This reunion story better not turn into what happened with the Disney story. Yeah, I guess I never really got around to the Disney story. The Disney story was an absolute crap show. The reunion was fun. I had a fun time. Went into my former high school. They're about to tear it down in the fall. The principal was there, and he gave me a tour around. And it was weird being in that building after 40 years. The building now is about 55, 60 years old, and they're going to tear it down. And there was no booze, if you can believe it, in the reunion because it was done in a school.
Probably smart, yeah.
But some dudes got a kegger, and we just had to walk through the kitchen and go out the back door and grab the keg. There were people who watched the show who I haven't seen for 40 years who watched the show, and that was exciting. And a lot of people who are very excited about Sex and the City, women of my age. Sex and the City was mandatory viewing. It was predated the COVID vaccine mandates. You had to watch if you were a woman in your 20s or 30s. Back around the turn of the century, you had to watch Sex and the City, and people.
Bulimic LA guy. That's Sam Seder.
Yep, that was me, and but it was fun. I met. I didn't meet anybody. I mean, I reconnected with friends of mine who were, former mayor of Worcester. I saw my good friend Les, who is who was the class president. And he is now the president of a historically black university called Clinton College in South Carolina. He's got an amazing story, personal story. I think they're even making a documentary about him because when we were in high school, he was unhoused for part of it. There's a whole backstory to what happened with this development in Worcester, public housing that destroyed a neighborhood to try to build some public housing. It was, and left a lot of people sort of in between homes. Who else? An expert on India who got, well, I'm not going to say this story because he's still embarrassed, but it was of stuff that happened in high school. But it was fun. I had a good time. There was a couple people there who I bummed were not there. One guy is, I guess, a high school basketball coach, and he had a game. But there were some people, it was one kid I knew turned into a surgeon. And he was the last guy I would have thought.
Oh, I was going to ask, did people's trajectories match up with what you would expect?
Actually, no. I had this other friend, and she, I think she's a professor now in Delaware, but she was in the FBI for 8 years or something.
Oh, wow.
I was surprised about that. What other things surprised me? No, everything else was there. Electricians, firefighters, one surgeon, some people, do business stuff that I don't really understand. One guy was doing special effects. He did most of the special effects for Jurassic Park.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
It's a big one.
Yeah. Wide array of different things that people are doing. A lot of school teachers. Oh, a judge. This woman I knew in high school is now a judge. So I'm covered. I'm covered. Totally. You can't get in trouble in Worcester. I know a judge. I can get off. All that. Should we do this Tim Scott thing? Which one should we do? Do we do both these, 11 and 12? Which one's better?
I would actually say 12 and 13 because I think the Schlapp Bannon thing is funny as well.
Let's do Schlapp and Bannon. I mean,
Okay.
Because if there's anybody who should be concerned about awards given out for sexual assault, it should be Matt Schlapp. It's amazing that he's still sort of managed to survive this. But
yeah, kind of concerning actually.
The level of denial in the Republican Party is pretty impressive. Folks, I should tell you, we're not going to take any more phone calls. Appreciate you hanging on the line. Don't want to keep anybody hanging anymore. We will take more phone calls tomorrow. Here is Matt Schlapp, still the chairman of CPAC, despite the fact that there have been at least one series of credible reports that he attempted to sexually assault a Republican operative guy who was working. I think they were working on the Herschel Walker campaign or something, right? Is that what it was?
He was a Herschel Walker staffer, the guy who alleged this.
And was giving Schlapp a ride back to his hotel, who was in town, and apparently Schlapp thought that meant, oh, I can attempt to fondle your genitalia, which is a mistake that people often make when they're getting a ride. But here's Matt Schlapp with Steve Bannon talking about the second defamation judgment against Trump regarding his sexual assault that he committed against E. Jean Carroll, and then his relentless insistence that she is a liar, even though it's been established now, at least by the court on a civil trial, that she's not, so much so that he now owes her $83 million.
First, you're here for CPAC. Understand you're pressed for time. Give me your thoughts on E.J. Carroll defamation suit against President Trump in the border, sir.
Look, this is outrageous. As I think people are beginning to grasp. Once a formerly great state of New York, where both my parents were.
If I'm Matt Schlapp, pause it. If I'm Matt Schlapp, I'm going to be a little bit more careful on this. Like I can't help but think that Steve Bannon's like, let's make Schlapp sweat a little bit. He thinks he's coming on to talk about the border, but let's make him sweat a little bit by having
People are
to
really getting their
address.
hands on this information.
Exactly. Let's let him have to address a sexual assault claim because that could be uncomfortable for Schlapp. It'd just be fun. Go ahead.
Look, this is outrageous. As I think people are beginning to grasp. Once a formerly great state of New York, where both my parents were born and raised, once they fully embrace this woke, Marxist, fascist nonsense, you're not going to get justice. And this has nothing to do with settling any kind of grievance. This has to do with taking all the ready cash that Donald Trump might have and taking it away from him so he can't continue to be a candidate for president. And I believe this is a very coordinated thing. Somebody must be coordinating this, because we now know that the White House counsel met with the boyfriend of Fawny down there in Georgia. The White House counsel's office seems to be a part of much of this. We know that DOJ has been running point for the Hunter Biden defense team and trying to give him sweetheart deals. And all this is about stopping Donald Trump. Now, how is all of that not campaign expenditures? This is like the Russian collusion dossier, which was a Hillary Clinton DNC deal. They are explicitly using their power in a corrupt way. They're using our taxpayer money in a corrupt way to try to stop Trump in every conceivable way. And I'll just tell you, if you're listening to this and you're worth something south of $83 million, like all of us, almost all of us, this means that this weaponized government doesn't just intend to destroy your career and cancel you on social media. They mean to impoverish you and destroy any opportunity you have in the future. This is a make it or break it time for the United States of America. If these things continue to stand, all of this unconstitutional legal activity, we got nothing left, Steve. I mean, it's run to the mountains, run to the catacombs time. Yeah. And so this is a huge moment for us to stand up.
And that's what CPAC, I talked about CPAC. You got a bunch of announcements to make, but this is end of the Republic stuff that's happening right here. CPAC couldn't be more timely. It's in about 30 days. So tell us what's going to go on.
Yeah, I think the first thing is we got to start highlighting the heroes who stand up.
One second. Can I just say this? We can let it go in a second. But this is Matt Schlapp basically saying, hey, the lawsuit, the new charges in the lawsuit also claim that CPAC knew of past allegations of my sexual assault. And this is coming from Carlton Huffman, a Republican staffer. This is a civil case that is being brought against Matt Schlapp. It was a civil case brought by a private individual against Donald Trump for the A3. It's not the DOJ. It's not anybody else. It's not the deep state trying to bankrupt a billionaire, a supposed billionaire. Incidentally, $83 million to a billionaire, if you're really a billionaire, I mean, even if you're like a 400 millionaire, okay, $83 million, that's not great. But you still have $300 million left.
Yeah. Maybe don't let it make it so like, look, if you're going to go up against the deep state, I would not do things like malign people you are accused of raping.
He could have shut up after the first time out there, and either he's mentally incapable of it, or thinks it's going to benefit him in terms of like free media. I don't know.
Right.
But the key thing would be to less sexual assault. I mean, there were 17 women with allegations against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And apparently there's multiple ones against Matt Schlapp too.
Well, solidarity.
There you go. Is there any more worth playing there?
Going to go on.
Yeah, I think the first thing is we got to start highlighting the heroes who stand up to the abuses, the people that say I'm getting sued or I'm being prosecuted, I'm going to stand up. People like Brandon Strzok at the Walkaway Movement, what Julie Kelly has done chronicling all the abuses on J6, and now she's kind of focusing like a laser on all the abuses about Donald Trump, the parents, the teachers who've been fired or who've been cut out of the process, all this gender confusion idiocy. We're going to have the experts there on the ground who are pushing back, but also they're going to tell their stories. And I think that's awfully important. I think the other thing about CPAC, Steve, is that Trump doesn't win, this country might be a spent bullet. I hate saying that because I love my country. So we haven't announced Donald Trump yet.
Oh, hang on. Whoa. Give me that again, because you're not normally a hair on fire guy. Repeat that for me.
I think I worry that if Donald Trump's not elected president, I really do think the America that we know is done. Why do I say that? It's not like one man should be able to change history, but Donald Trump has all of us in his hands, on his shoulders, all around him. He's standing up for all of us when he takes these slings and arrows. And if they're able to keep him out of that White House, I know he's going to win, but if they're ever somehow to keep him out of that White House, they're going to change this country in a way that you've never seen. This $83 million is just the beginning. All of us will be paraded down this gangplank. We won't have our resources. We won't have our homes. We won't have our livelihood.
Was worried about his
and
lawsuit.
I think the people that watch and listen to your show understand that. But today, when I heard that news, I'm like, it's worse than I thought.
Oh yeah, I bet it is.
That's such a posture that you're using clearly to propagandize. Like,
this is the thing is that it's also look at that link I just sent you. It's not just sort of like the political propaganda. This is one of the most self-serving things I've ever seen. Right, and here's why. This is from December 16th of 2023. Pop this up. This is CNN headline. 2 more sexual assault claims surface against the head of conservative political organization. This dude knows that he knows his prophecy is going to come true. First, they come for Donald Trump, and then they come for me, and then they come for you. And at the very least, he's going to get to the me part because he has his own sexual assault civil lawsuits against him.
If they can go after Donald Trump,
Republican staffer.
Yeah.
And not like some type of like never Trumper from someone who worked for Herschel Walker.
No, if they can go after Trump, they can go after the head of a conservative political organization, for instance.
Yes, who is groping guys who are giving him rides as part of his campaign duties. Amazing. Got to hand it to him. It's pretty good. We'll play these. What's that?
Hand it to him. You mean that one?
Oh, gosh. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. That was probably. Yep. All right. Sorry.
And then to shoehorn the gender confusion stuff in there on top of all of it is unbelievable.
He shoehorned everything. It was like a sort of tap dance. It was like a medley of all the different things they got going on. I mean, I guess that's what CPAC's going to be. I can't wait for a month from
now. We got a couple of clips. Climate Defiance had a great protest where they shut down a talk by Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan on Saturday. We'll play that tomorrow. Read a couple of IMs and then we are out of here, ladies and gentlemen. Got time for like 4 IMs. Train boy. Everyone should take a train across this country. It's an amazing experience. I've done it about 3 times so far. Yeah, it really gets nice too. In Colorado, I don't know if they still have this, but if you take there's a leg of it where they have a glass ceiling train. I don't know if they still have that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It really is amazing.
I did that. I took a train from Fargo to Seattle, and that's the observation train is a great time.
Really beautiful. Now I think I would be more outgoing. When I was younger, I was
I'm surprised at you. Yeah.
It's just not. I'm not as social as I come off. I think maybe sometimes. Comtree, crazy that UN workers on the ground in Gaza are being radicalized to fight Israel's oppression. I mean, it would be crazy to think that there is, when you're talking about 13,000 employees. Yeah. I mean, come on. Even and that's stipulating what the Israelis are saying is true. Fizzy drinks. The more Biden tries to speak with authority and conviction, the more I hear him slur and mumble. I think that's true. Cole from Michigan. Is there a way to give to UNRWA directly? I don't know. And frankly, I don't know that private donations are going to be able to fund this. Jay Tingle. How is Mrs. Pelosi's mouthpiece permitted to refer to her as speaker? It seems misleading at the very least. She's not even the minority leader. I find it especially galling when on Meet the Press, the host addresses prominent liar Newt Gingrich as Mr. Speaker. Gingrich was removed from the speaker position in disgrace many years ago. The scoundrel Gingrich was put out by the demotion. He abandoned his congressional seat midterm. Hack all things. Can you please buy ads on Libertarian YouTube? We need more callers. This dry spell sucks. Actually, that's a great idea. Big house. My partner just got accepted into medical school, and as someone who is a chemist and can barely afford to live off my wages, hopefully this means we will not be financially saved.
You read that one?
Oh, I read that one. All right. And the final IM of the day. Another Dan, my high needs nephew goes to Newton schools, and it's a really bad time for him to be out of school due to the strike. I still 100% support this strike because I blame the petty tyrants of small, rich town. Sadly, the ranking mass Democratic leadership support the legal ban on strikes because it inconveniences them. Yeah, folks, don't forget about those Newton teachers out on strike to help kids with special needs and kids across the school. Of course, if you're anywhere in the area, go walk a little bit on the picket line. If you're driving by, blow your horn. I don't know, bring folks a pizza, show solidarity, call your, I don't know, they got a mayor, but I don't know if they've got, I imagine they have a city council in Newton. Every little bit helps. All right, folks. Bradley, good job today. Matt, good job. Emma, good job last night. I don't know what you're doing today, but we'll see you guys tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my you don't get paid for the rope that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.